Hi, my name is Shaun Humphreys, and I want to welcome you to the Mastering Fat Loss seminar. Take Charge of Change delivers a range of workshops and training to both individuals and organizations, and this particular seminar content comes out of a fairly comprehensive nutritional wellness program that we put on, both for individuals in a public setting and organizations. At Take Charge of Change, we believe our role is to help individuals and organizations to be resilient. And to be resilient is the ability to fight through the natural inertia in our lives and our environment that tends to keep us from the accomplishment of important missions or goals and objectives in our lives. And there's no doubt that we're in a world now of tremendous change. The speed of change is absolutely amazing as we see globalization, technology, driving changes politically, environmentally, societally, in all kinds of areas of life. And those changes at a macro level are having impacts on individuals and organizations. So as individuals are dealing with change, they're bringing the impacts of those change into the work world, and that can have sometimes a negative impact on productivity and employee engagement and fulfillment. But why fat loss? Fat loss is an important component of wellness training. And so when we look at the various aspects of New Year's resolutions and important goals for people, I mean, there's no doubt they want to look a little bit better in the bathing suit in the summertime and get to maybe healthier weight goals where health generally improves. And so fat loss, I think, is an important area. Now, this presentation is not to be construed as medical advice, but just good overall information that I hope you can take and apply in some way in your personal circumstances. Fat loss and weight loss generally is a very complex area, and it's multifaceted, whether you look at the psychological aspects of weight loss, the emotional aspects. It ties into obviously nutritional practices and exercise and our environment. So this particular seminar is not going to deal with all those issues, but we're going to give you 10 tips that you can apply right away to your current wellness program, and I think you'll find the presentation extremely helpful. So let's get into it. Well, I guess the first thing we'll talk about is why is it hard to manage your weight? Millions and millions of pounds are gained and lost every year. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of the people that are losing the weight are gaining that weight right back. And there's a lot of factors that conspire against us that get in the way of us accomplishing our goals in this area. So let's talk about some of those factors. This is not an exhaustive treatise on all the reasons, but I think these are some key reasons that we need to be aware of. And the more that we're aware of them, the more we can fight back against their subtle influences in our lives. The first one is nutritional illiteracy. Now, you would think with all the information we have at our disposal these days, so the internet and all the information that's out there, that we would be able to make better nutritional choices. But I think one of the issues for folks is that there's just so much information. That the volume of information is very hard to sort of cut through and get to the kernels of wisdom and good information we can apply. The other thing is I think sometimes there's misinformation. You know, there's hundreds of millions of dollars being spent by Madison Avenue to help the manufacturers of processed foods to get us to buy those foods. And sometimes there's partial truths, but not all the truth. Sometimes the way things are packaged is deceiving. And we end up buying products and services because of a little bit of deception sometimes, or maybe misinformation or incomplete information. So we do need to be students, I think, of this area, because ultimately the things that we put in our health, probably 80% of our health long term is going to be driven by the foods we eat. And so it's important that we take ownership over that area by studying and learning as much as we can about healthy food practices. Number two, the diet sometimes is not tied to our core values. Again, what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. Let's say that as a father, one of my core values and goals in life is to make sure that I'm intentional around connecting with my children, being involved in their lives, and having energy to be involved with them. And yet when I go through my work day, I'm giving some of the best energy that I have to my work life, and by the time I get home, if I haven't managed my diet and my health well, I have no energy for my kids. I get home and I'm impatient, or I don't have energy for them, I'm disengaged, I don't have the ability to be attentive to them. I think that if we actually become intentional around linking dietary practices with the important values and goals in our life, we can become much more effective in our weight loss and fat loss goals. But we do have to be intentional. We actually have to say, okay, if I keep doing what I'm doing, is it supportive of my goals around being a good father and being actively engaged in that? If it's not going to support that, then I need to feel the pain and discomfort of that as a motivator to make me change or help me to change. We self-medicate using food. We talk about emotional healing, and I think that food can often be a very satiating, emotionally supportive kind of activity. We all have our comfort foods, and food has great memories and experiences attached to it. There's those favorite foods that we have, those family get-togethers when we have the great foods and certain tastes and textures that we just really, really enjoy. So when we're under stress, we might reach for those comfort foods, and they're not always the best foods for us. Sometimes they're laden with fat or sugar or salt, and by very definition, they're not necessarily good for our health. We might reach for some carbohydrates because at a subconscious level, we do it because those carbohydrates might spike the production of serotonin in our brains, which is kind of a feel-good chemical, and we get that short-term high or satisfaction or feel good, and we reach for that food subconsciously to create that emotion. So we self-medicate. Number 4, poor rituals, poor planning. A couple of examples. A lot of times people, because life is very busy, we make expedient decisions around our food choices. So when our blood sugar's dropped and are really hungry, we're in a rush, and we have to get something into our bodies, in that moment, will you make a good food choice? And I'd say the vast majority of people won't. They'll make poor food choices. And so the way you cope with that is you plan more effectively. If I have a long day at work, I know I'm going to be at work tomorrow through lunch, maybe dinner, I'll make sure that I try to pack the lunch the night before, bring that with me, so I've been proactive. On the days that I don't do that, I often don't make good decisions from a dietary standpoint. So, one of the goals is to be attentive. If you go grocery shopping, make sure you've got that prepared list. Make sure that you're going around the perimeter of the store and picking the more healthy foods, the fruits, the vegetables, the lean cuts of meat for your nutrition. If you walk into that store unprepared, keep in mind that, again, marketers are spending a lot of money to get you down those middle aisles to buy processed foods. And so if you go in there hungry or unprepared, you're going to end up buying some food products that probably aren't supportive to your goals in this area. Family meal times. Studies have confirmed that families that eat together generally are healthier together. So the preparation of healthy meals as a family, spending time leisurely eating, eating slowly, visiting, spending time in relationship, those are just good practices to do anyway, and they're supportive to healthy weight management. It's interesting, one study that I read recently took families and they reduced plate sizes and cutlery sizes, and they found just by making that one change, people ate less and lost weight. So there's traditions in our life. We need to think through the good ones and reinforce them, and then the bad practices, try to move them out of our lives over time. The influence of the culture and media is profound. So the media is constantly sending messages our way about how to manage our weight and nutritional practices. I think the big frustration, at least for me when I watch the media, is that it gets very fixated on the latest drug or the latest diet, whether it's South Beach or Atkins or The Zone or others, when you know what, it's not that simple. Again, at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about the fact that it's multifaceted, and the minute you get focused on one sort of magic bullet, that's probably the minute that you're now going down the wrong path, and you're probably setting yourself up to failure. So I think that we need to be very careful about what we consume from the media. The good stuff, take it, but keep in mind that there's an agenda usually. The influence of the culture as well, so through advertising or cultural practices, can negatively influence us. And there's family traditions that sometimes get in the way of that. Just the way we prepare meals, is the culture we come from, and sometimes those cultural practices, although important, maybe sometimes are not supportive to health. Now, you would think that your friends and family would be really important allies in your weight loss goals or your fat reduction goals. And in fact, they can be an extremely important part of your team if they're lined up with you. But sometimes people will be a little bit defensive when you start taking a new track, trying to change patterns in your life. And at a subconscious level, they might undermine some of the goals that you're trying to accomplish. So don't be surprised if the people closest to you that you think would be supportive of your goals here might be defensive, and at a subconscious level, not all that supportive. So just realize that's a possibility. Psychologists have discovered that we have something called mirror neurons. And essentially what that means is that we begin to mirror the behavior, we model the behavior that's shown to us by the key influencers, relationships in our lives. If we hang around with people who have poor diet and nutrition practices, don't exercise, aren't looking after their health, we will naturally tend to mirror that activity. And we have to fight very hard to break free of that influence. If, on the other hand, we're hanging around with people that exercise regularly, eat high-quality foods, that are nutritious, embrace wellness, you know what? We'll begin to adopt those values as well. So it's a little tip there. If you want to reach your goals, you want to try to, over time, surround yourself with people that are like-minded and share those goals and ideas with you. Believe it or not, hormonal levels can get in the way of fat loss, and in our more comprehensive program we talk about this, and I really think that's important when people embark on a wellness program to benchmark their current health, which would include vitamin D levels and inflammation levels in their blood system, hormonal levels, body fat percentages, lean body mass. There's a whole host of things to take a look at so you can benchmark where you are today, whether there's some issues you have to identify to be dealt with, and then develop a program as to about where you are now, where you want to get to in terms of your health goals. Very important. So believe it or not, hormonal levels and sometimes even just poor nutritional practices generally will get in the way of fat loss. And the last point is food addictions. Food addictions ties a little bit to the self-medicating aspect of food in point 3. Food manufacturers understand that if you lace food with salt, sugar, and fat, it's very satiating and very pleasant, and something that we quite enjoy as human beings. And so when we ingest foods like that, it almost gives us this both brain chemical and physiological wash over our bodies. We get a spike of energy, we might feel better, you see serotonin levels and dopamine levels going up, and so we see this increase, enhanced mood, maybe energy, but it doesn't last. So these foods are not satiating long term, they don't provide proper nutrition often, and then our body's wanting for nutrition, and before we know it, we want to eat again because we haven't fed it properly. These foods provide that temporary high, and then we crash down. We get bluesy again, we get loss of energy, then we look for those foods again to get that quick hit, and you see people oscillating through their days ingesting these foods because quite frankly, they're addicted to that cycle. We want over time to be successful in weight management, to get off that cycle, to smooth out the blood sugar fluctuations, to eat properly, to get away from the addictive cycle. And if you look at the spikes and how that cycle looks, quite frankly, it looks an awful like addiction to drugs as an example. So we don't often think of food as an addictive substance, but we do medicate with it, and it does have addictive qualities, and we sometimes have to get away and fight those food addictions to be successful in our weight loss goals. Okay, so those are the main reasons why it's sometimes hard to manage weight. There are others for sure, but those are some ones to maybe think about. So let's talk about the 10 tips or principles that you can utilize to meet your body fat weight loss goals.